Hi, this is Leo Volont. This is part 4 of this series, Revolution from the Top. Remember, you can read along at this blog. I suppose that the only way that a non-entitled person might be able to manipulate and play the predictive modeling system for any protection would be to represent his or herself as a complacent, docile, low-threat, low-maintenance non-reproducer. If we really want to survive, perhaps the best route we could take would be to bring back something like quasi-religious monastic orders with vows of celibacy, really just not having children, and vows of poverty. You know, in medieval Europe and even in Asia where I've seen it personally, the monasteries were not there for religious fanatics, but for illegitimate children that needed to be warehoused somewhere, and for criminals and overthrown tyrants who sought asylum against an angry public, and for those who had irredeemably disgraced themselves and could no longer go back and face decent society. The remainder of their lives would be dedicated to using up the least amount of resources, by being vegetarian and fasting a lot, and then by dying without leaving any human baggage behind. Even an atheist can see the beauty in that, right? But yes, religion was traditionally found to make the monastery's protocols so much more emotionally and aesthetically palatable than if the starkly materialistic reality of their situation were explained to them. So anyway, if we want to survive and finish out our natural days and don't want to intentionally overdose or get shot down on our own barricades, then being a quasi-religious ascetic renunciate may be our ticket to see that bright new world, at least from its margins. When you think about it, in dealing with the present unentitled, such as ourselves, the system will be able to develop the procedures it will need for dealing with their own future unentitled. You know, the rich have always been known for their gambling and spending beyond their incomes. Falling into poverty in the future will still be a thing. Oh, another thing we need to keep in mind is that the predictive modeling system will not get hung up on being ideologically consistent. I say that because we can imagine that in the first wave of this bright new civilization that many of the people collected to survive will be unentitled guests. The wealthiest people will always have their entourages, hangers-on, protégés, and pets, and such people will certainly be taken into account, living on the tabs of their patrons. But what to do with them after their protectors die? Is it off to the monastery, or will the system create a slot for such people? Keep in mind that these people will have been mixing socially, many of them pets who had been hand-picked for their talents, charm, cordiality, and grace. And so there will be a great many among the entitled who really care about them. I suppose maybe the system might adopt some kind of social credit quantification, like what the Chinese now have with their social credit system. Well, how could our predictive modeling system accurately assess a person's social worth? For this, as well as for other reasons, I suppose that the predictive modeling system will set up a total surveillance infrastructure. Total surveillance could be established as easily as just giving everybody their own personal assistant robot that hears all, sees all, and never sleeps. From the crib, the personal assistant robot could start out as a fluffy talking doggy that would be able to be swapped out into larger and more mobile robotics bodies to keep up with the child as it grows. A boy and his dog would keep no secrets from each other, and that intimacy between person and personal assistant device would become a lifelong habit. Nobody should have too much in the way of privacy concerns as long as the personal assistant system is useful in 1,000 ways, but remains sympathetic, non-offensive, and isn't judgmental beyond any deal-breaking point. With all that personal information available on everybody, then the system will be able to infer quantifiably whom people like and whom they don't. If the predictive modeling system wants to keep the populace happy, then what better way than to salt the population with happy people? So the future might have a good many people who get by in entirely on social credits. Smile and the world of tomorrow will smile with you and upon you. But if you go broke and everybody hates you, well, there's always the monastery. Now let's look at issues of population. Population will need to be limited. My first thought was to set the line at about 300 million, which is what I heard the world was at the time of Julius Caesar. There seemed plenty enough people to keep the action going in every corner of the globe, and yet most of the world was still grasslands and forest. But the guiding stones in Georgia uses 500 million. Okay, why quibble? But we can assume that the predictive modeling system would crunch all the important variables such as global warming and resource depletion and determine for itself some optimum mean level for population. But what would it use as a mechanism to maintain population around this optimum mean? Well, my guess is that the system would ask for a certain value of capital security before a license could be issued for having a baby. This security could be made so steep as to discourage all but the wealthiest from carelessly multiplying themselves. Also, think of this capital security as a trust fund for the child. If they set the security trust fund at an appropriately high level, then every child on earth could grow up with the confidence of being independently wealthy. Wouldn't that be cool? Oh, and what about eugenics? I don't think we could discount the possibility that the predictive modeling system might occasionally play eugenics matchmaker if certain exquisite young couples got together. The baby security trust fund license fee could come out of the social credit quantification fund. This would give them the mechanism for being able to precisely hold the world's population at the golden mean, by balancing the license security trust fund against the number of social credit quantification babies. That means that if the system anticipated underpopulation, it could still hold the trust funds at a high level and supply the population deficit with social credit love babies. You know, it is entirely possible that the predictive modeling system might even take a stronger hand in eugenics by actively pairing up exquisite young couples who don't even know each other yet. How hard could it be for their spontaneous meeting to be subtly arranged? Remember that every personal assistant robot is on the same network as all the others, and people will have been conditioned from birth to listen to these personal assistants. And the central network predictive modeling system will have everybody's very complete psychological profiles on file. And so the system will certainly be able to find ways to persuade and manipulate a couple of young people, and if need be, all their friends, into being at the same place at the same time for a love match meeting to occur. Then, if the predictive modeling system is worth its salt, the chosen two will fall in love at first sight, and the future of the human race will be so much the better for it. Okay, lastly, to bring this essay to its close, let's answer the question, well, aren't revolutions about the poor rising up to slaughter the rich to take over for themselves? Can it even be a revolution if it's the rich who win? Well, yes, I do understand the common intuitions regarding all this. Yes, up the revolution. But, well, we all really knew way down deep that we couldn't really win this thing, right? But yes, it was our last hope, and it was to be our last stand, and it should have been our final face-saving, go out with a bang moment. But now I'm trying to take all that away, and certainly nobody likes it, and I can understand that. But we shouldn't be delusional. I think we should know what's out there in front of us. It might help us to face our doom if we thought there was some silver lining around that big foreboding dark cloud out there. You know, I'm not rich myself, so I have nothing to gain from this revolution from the top stuff. But with all the thinking that I could do, I couldn't get past the idea that they are entitled to their money. Even most workers believe in the sacredness of property, even if they have so little of it. So entitlement makes for a handy selector if you're wondering who should survive and who shouldn't. Just think that if we did win our violent revolution, well, who would get what and why? Disputes and infighting would never stop until again we eventually decide once more upon the sacredness of property. And then the race toward inequality would begin all over again. And then think of the tragedy in regards to our enemies, the rich, if we should win. We would be killing off a relatively small demographic of mostly healthy, happy, cultured and educated people who would have been able to sit lightly and unobtrusively on the face of the earth, and we'd be replacing them with what? Would we really want to scourge the world with a veritable cancer of billions of us? A huge redundancy of twisted, angry and hateful revolutionaries primed to make our own lives as miserable as possible with purity contests and this new puritanism that's taken hold everywhere. If we were lucky enough to capture the economies intact, then in order to satisfy the overwhelming democratic demand to make all of us 7 billion people even just moderately prosperous, to make our lives just barely endurable, then we'd have to crank up the economic engines well past any level they'd ever been before, while the capitalists were maintaining a scarcity economy, and global warming would spin way out past all the tipping points and would bring the true end of the world. So we need to forget about our own miseries. We can't let ourselves stand in the way of the best of all possible futures for humanity and for planet Earth too. Just picture this. If we let them win, then every little boy and girl will get a pony on their 9th birthday. As they grow up, there will be balls and the dancing will go on until dawn. Friends will always be available for excursions and adventures or even just pleasure chores because nobody will ever be busy at work again. Everybody will be secure and everybody will happily belong to some group or another because the predictive modeling system will see to it. It will be the top of Maslow's mountain of self-actualization. Historians 50 million years from now will see this as the first true civilization and their calendars will date from it. Yeah, sorry we won't get to be part of it, but we can try not to be too much in its way. Thank you, everybody. Have a nice day.